Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity, the podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world. With self-care strategies from Chinese medicine, functional medicine, Ayurveda, neuroscience, and beyond. I'm your host, Brody Welch, a licensed acupuncturist and transformation catalyst, here to support you on your journey of health, happiness, and personal evolution. Hello, and welcome to A Healthy Curiosity. Before getting to today's interview conversation portion of the show, I've got a question for you, which may seem ridiculously obvious and basic, but it's one that I really want you to take seriously. Why do you want to be healthy? Health isn't actually an end in itself. It's a kind of currency. When we have health, it's way easier to do our work in the world. It's easier to get around on this physical plane of existence, to go places, to see people, to have adventures without feeling like we're dragging or being distracted by pain. It allows us to stay independent as we grow older. Health allows us to contribute. It allows us to fulfill our purpose if we believe we have one. But at its core, health can simply be about feeling good. As a coach, I help clients establish healthy habits like exercise, breathing, moving in ways that feel good and nourishing and supportive. And it is not uncommon for people to be so focused on what they think is their goal that they forget what they're really in it for, which is usually to feel good. Whether or not they're meeting a scale goal in a weight loss process, if they focus on the things that they're doing to take care of themselves, like making time to exercise or nourish themselves well, they can end up realizing that they already feel amazing even before the goal that they think they need to reach in order to feel that way is reached. Or like meditation, for example. Does it feel great to beat yourself up for not meditating? Like that's kind of not the point, right? That a lot of times we're meditating to have a more peaceful and gentle relationship with ourselves. So I like to make sure that my clients are really in touch with their why, the reason behind putting forth all this effort towards making change, because a lot of times if the journey is at odds with the destination, the ends don't justify the means. And it may be that we can go right to how we want to feel instead of actually putting that off into some uncertain future that's down the road. In the past few years, I've noticed a shift in our culture at large, that the notion of self-care is something that people are taking increasingly seriously. And of course, if you've listened to the show, you know my spiel about the empty calories of self-care being the one and done things that are an escape from your life rather than the core habits that we all need to treat ourselves with ongoing deep respect. In any case, it's become more acceptable to do the things that we need to do to take care of ourselves, like sleep and eat well and exercise and meditate. And that we've seen this rise in meditation apps. We've seen employers recognizing the need for downtime and at least giving lip service to people taking time for themselves. Of course, during the pandemic, this has been tricky. But even as the notion of taking care of ourselves has become more acceptable as far as the needs of the body, I think it still remains difficult for people to claim what they know they need to do to take care of their hearts and souls, or simply to feel good. Right? This is a component of health. This is our birthright. And in a culture where it's like already hard to prioritize things like the basics, the getting enough sleep, the exercising, the healthy food, the tending to your emotions, it can be even harder to make time for things that feel frivolous, which is essentially the things like play that have no side benefit of productivity, activities that you do simply because you enjoy them, things you do for their own sake, because it's fun, because it feels good. This is actually the definition of play, an activity that you do for its own sake or for your own enjoyment. As a recovering type A, I will readily admit to the fact that play is not something that comes naturally to me. It is not something that I have historically prioritized, but it has been something that I am taking increasingly seriously, if that's not ironic, taking play seriously. I want to feel good, and I want to make time to do the things that feel fun. And that doesn't go against my desire to continue to be the best possible clinician and coach and practitioner I can be, and to be continuing to like learn and grow and all of that. But that can't be the only slice of the pie. There's got to be these other dimensions of existence. And so to help people get in touch with like how to play, if this is something that has gone by the wayside, I like to encourage my clients to think back to what did they love to do as a little kid. And for me, this was like running around outside with my friends, and it was turning the woods at the end of my street into an imaginary land, and just using my imagination creatively, being outside, using my body. I love doing gymnastics, which is maybe why I love yoga so much now. And I also loved getting lost in a book. I loved reading, but I think maybe starting in high school, throughout college, certainly throughout the time when I was both working and going to school for massage therapy and then acupuncture school and then starting a practice, literally the only books I would be reading were things about herbs and about points and healing and psychology and neuroscience and all these things that could help other people. And I think I was in my 30s before I got back into just reading fiction. And fast forward to earlier this year when COVID hit, and I had to close my clinic. And suddenly I had a lot more time than I was used to having. Yet, because I have been packing my life pretty full, it was suddenly really uncomfortable to have space and time, not to mention the overall discomfort of wondering if I was going to have a livelihood and a professional life as far as my acupuncture clinic goes. And one of the things that really helped me just feel good, as well as providing some excellent healthy distraction, was reading novels. One day, when I had finished a novel, at the back of my Kindle, I followed one of those people who liked this book also read whatever suggestion, and found myself in this unfamiliar genre of romance novels. This is not something I'd really delved into very much, but I discovered that romance novels was the perfect escape. It was utterly unchallenging, undemanding, that let me focus on the lives of these fictional people who I don't know, and that would inevitably result in people being happy. It's kind of the whole point of the genre. People getting laid, enjoying their bodies, finding love, finding connection, and generally being happy. I was pleasantly surprised to find that I was experiencing some vicarious joy through the lives of these fictional characters. And I'll even go so far as to say that challenging myself to sit and read fiction at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon represented some not insignificant personal growth for me. It meant that I was doing things differently than my typical overworking, overfunctioning patterning, and really putting to the test that notion that I didn't have to earn the right to relax. If you're on my email list, you recently received something from me about my annual fall resilience challenge, which is to do less than you're humanly capable of. And if you're not on my email list, why aren't you on my email list? Go to brodywelch.com and get on it so we can stay in touch that way too. So the Do Less Challenge is one place to start in terms of enjoying your life. By doing less than you're humanly capable of, you can create space to put in something that you would truly love to do, that you would truly enjoy, and that the only end of which is your enjoyment. Like, you can't even couch it in like someone else is going to benefit from this. And if you're not sure what to do with that time that gets freed up, consider, is there something that you used to love to do as a kid that you could get back into? Or how could you take something that you know you already enjoy, like for me, reading, and put a new twist on it to experience it in a different way and maybe discover something else that is truly fun and playful? Part of living your authentic truth means ditching the programming that makes you yang addicted and feeling like you're not allowed to do the things that just feel good and just enjoy. And that is what I want for you. Let me know how it goes. You can always reach out to me at brody@brodywelch.com. Brody with an IE, Welch with a CH. And now on to today's conversation with my friend and colleague, Dr. Amy Zahm. Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity. I'm your host, Brody Welch, and today we're going to be talking about transitions, specifically the transitions that we experience hormonally as women throughout our lives that don't get talked about very often. Seems like when we are learning about our bodies in health class growing up, we hear about puberty and that's about it. Like we don't necessarily get the blueprint about what to expect at these other points of hormonal transition in life, perimenopause and menopause. With me today to unpack this conversation is Amy Zahm. Amy Zahm is a doctor of acupuncture and Oriental medicine who's been practicing in rural Northeast Oregon for 16 years. Amy specializes in women's health, mental and emotional health, chronic illness, and pain management. She has a particular love for using the principles of Chinese medicine to help women of all ages navigate the transitional periods of their lives with more ease and grace than our society generally allows. In addition to serving Wallowa County, she will soon be expanding her practice to include telehealth. Look for Ground and Sky, Chinese and Functional Medicine for Women's Health at groundandsky.com. Meanwhile, Amy and I are going to be having this conversation today. So, like, already going beyond rural Oregon to hopefully connect people who need this information with those who love talking about it. Amy and I, in addition to attending acupuncture school at Southwest Acupuncture College in Albuquerque at the same time, and even in some of the same classes, she and I shared a massage therapy space back in the day, like when we didn't have we weren't seeing clients on the same day because our school schedules were alternating. So we shared this space. And so we didn't see each other all that often, but we did have this sort of energetic, we walked in the same energetic circles a lot. And recently just had the opportunity to reconnect with Amy in this age of COVID where it's sort of inviting us to reach out to the connections that we still have in life, maybe with people we haven't talked to in a very long time, and seeing if those connections are still alive and vital. And it was so great to talk to her. And I'm so delighted that she's here today to talk with us. Amy Zahm, welcome to A Healthy Curiosity.
Thanks, Brody. I'm so glad to be here.
We have done a bunch of talks on perimenopause here on Healthy Curiosity, but I'm happy to revisit this topic again today because it's one that does not get nearly enough play in the media and in general. It's pretty mysterious. A lot of women come in and say like, in their 30s that their periods are starting to get irregular or something, and they're like, I think could it be menopause? Like, what's going on? And there's this degree of alarm of like, do I have a disease, or like, is this going to be forever? And it can be confusing. And so I'd like to start off with just diving into getting clear on what perimenopause is and what are its signs as we start to approach menopause, and just kind of like how it might show up for your patients.
Yeah, so that is I see exactly what you're talking about frequently. Women coming in their usually mid 30s, sometimes early 40s, with like, oh my God, I think it's happening, exactly like you said, because they're noticing that their periods are getting more irregular, they're changing, they're shorter, they're longer. The time between periods has gone from something that they could set the clock by to, oh my gosh, it comes every 18 days and then it doesn't come until another 40 days. And I'm feeling kind of weird and my life is so stressful. And inevitably the conversation goes toward all those other aspects of perimenopause that come along with the hormonal shifts that are happening,
Which are what exactly?
some unexpected weight gain, often trouble sleeping. I talk to a lot of women who may or may not have experienced mood swings with PMS, but as they come into this transition, they're experiencing more anxiety, more worry, maybe even what feels like depression, a little bit of brain fog, and the disruptions in their circadian rhythms and their sleep cycles. And I feel like also what I commonly hear is just a level of maybe fatigue or an inability to kind of soldier on through the stressful periods of their life in the way that they've been used to doing. Like suddenly they don't have the energy to
Yes. And
do
just
all those things from 6 a.m. until 11 o'clock
right. And
at
what's wrong
night.
with me that's
Right,
and,
right.
and just to kind of keep riffing on that is because I see this picture all the time, right? That things that they might have used to count on, whether it's something as simple as being able to sleep through the night
Mhm.
or have the energy that they used to, but that maybe with the mood swings or emotional aspects or even the unexpected weight gain, that kind of thing, it can make women doubt their bodies and themselves. It can undermine a sense of like, do I know what's going on? And like it can lead to a feeling of being kind of out of control
Mhm.
or confused. And I think this like it that in large part, like that sense of like powerlessness of feeling like victimized by not necessarily knowing what to expect and also not necessarily knowing what to do about it.
Right, exactly. I feel like there is a big shift in identity that starts to happen. And I think it comes from, when we're in our 20s and our early 30s, where we have lots of vital energy, lots of chi, and lots of drive, and we're able to just kind of override our body's signals that, hey, I need to take a break. I'm tired. I need to sleep a little more, and just keep doing what we're doing sort of with our will. And as we age, the natural progression of aging is just a decline in some of those resources. And I feel like one of the big pieces of the perimenopausal transition is the body stepping up to say, hey, I I need to be in charge for a little while. I need some tending, instead of allowing that will that we identify with so strongly when we're younger, that drives us to go and go and go and go.
In Chinese medicine, we have this concept of the will that's associated with the organ system of the kidneys. And it's the organ
Mhm.
system of the kidneys that contain this special substance called Jing that is what we think of as like the potential of who we could be, and also that controls these times of hormonal fluctuation. And so it's interesting to me that at a time when the Jing is kind of reorganizing and shape shifting, so that like, okay, with perimenopause at 35, we're gonna drop the amount of progesterone we have. Like we know
Mhm.
that's like one of the first shifts that happens. That
Yeah.
is that's kind of that mid 30s drop in progesterone before the kind of menopausal around 50 decline in estrogen that takes
Mhm.
place. So it's like both of these times are like little reorganization periods for the Jing, and that determines literally like how we show up in the world, and it kind of indicates that we're entering a different phase of life. And this can be kind of, you can think about it metaphorically, like we're moving from being like a child to being an adolescent, or we're moving from being an adolescent to being an adult, or we're moving, like, so there's these different
Mhm.
phases where we show up really differently in not only in our physiology, but what we pay attention to, what our role is in the world. And that also is plays a role in how women dance with the perimenopause and menopausal shifts. Talk to me about, from a Chinese medicine perspective, about this idea that different times in our lives are for different purposes.
Well, so in Chinese medicine, as you know, we have in our fundamental text, the Yellow Emperor's Classic of Chinese Medicine, they talk about the cycles of 7 for women. It's 7 years for women and 8 years for men. But each of these 7-year cycles represents a period of time in a woman's life. And I feel like the 7 years is a little bit of a misnomer, like, because by the time you get to the 7th cycle, you're around 49, and that's kind of considered, like, elderly.
Right.
in the Chinese medicine text, which may have been accurate in the days that those texts were written. But, with the increased lifespan that we have now, I tend to look at these cycles of 7 a little more metaphorically.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It can be. I mean, sometimes metaphorically. I think like age 14, that's still
Right.
true. Age 35,
Yes.
age 49, absolutely. There just have to be more of them.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Like the timing of the changes, but I think we live beyond the seventh cycle.
Totally
And
agreed.
those transitions are really important beyond, 49 and what 58 would it be? Is that right? 57? I don't know. Math is not my thing. Anyway, but the changes from one cycle to the other, like from childhood to adolescence, as you said, and then from adolescence into young adulthood, you think about, what we're doing as we're turning 21, we're leaving home, going to college or not going to college, but typically leaving our parents' home and stepping out into the world. And then as we hit 28, we're maybe embarking on our career and kind of finding our way. And then as we get to 35, we're in that period, which, in Western cycles and traditions, we often talk about the 3 cycles: the maiden, the mother, and the crone or the wise woman. And, so as we get into the mid 30s, we're kind of in the middle of that mother phase where we're sending our energy out into the world to nourish things. And our identity comes from this nourishment and this external expression of our creativity, and whether that's in the form of actual mothering of children or building careers or creative projects. But it's a very extroverted thing, and that continues into the next 7 years, our early 40s. But then things start to shift a little bit. And, as you said, the yin and yang balance shifts, the expression of our jing begins to shift. If we are mothers, maybe our children are leaving home. If we are career women and that's been our nourishing focus, perhaps our role in that career or our place in that career has changed from like the young, new upstart to maybe the mentor or maybe the business owner instead of the business employee, or all these kinds of shifts. And I think that as we move to that place where our energy starts to come back into us a little more instead of always going out into the world, I think one of the gifts of this transition is that it allows for our focus to come back to us as like, okay, who am I going to be in this new expression in this next stage of my life?
Well, that
And
that is
yeah.
really a great point. I want to just pause you there because I think it's so important to recognize like so your body, when your body is giving you a symptom, right? Something that you would qualify as like, huh, this is different. This is interesting. This
Mhm.
is, this is maybe not optimal. It's your body getting your attention, and what you do with
Mhm.
that information, like if you can choose to see it as a dialogue, that here's what my body's saying, how am I now going to reflect on this information and perhaps make a change in response to it?
Right.
So there absolutely is an opportunity here that as women, if we are feeling symptomatically perimenopausal or menopausal,
Mhm.
that there is an opportunity to look at what needs to change in order to keep up with this identity evolution piece.
Right. And I think something that you said earlier that's really important as we're talking about this is that as this starts to happen, how women can feel like suddenly their body isn't trustworthy because it's behaving differently. And there's this sense of betrayal, like, well, everything was fine and I could do everything I wanted to do and I could sleep through the night and my digestion was fine. And now all these things are happening. And I think shifting the view to exactly what you just said, that, oh, maybe this is not that my body is not trustworthy, maybe my body is totally trustworthy, And I just need to be willing to sit down and have a conversation with it and to listen to what it's asking me for.
So let's get into that, because I can imagine people kind of rolling their eyes like, okay,
Mhm.
yeah, my
Yeah.
body's talking to me. Like what, like just can it shut
Yeah.
up already? Or like what,
Right.
how, so like what, let's like actually unpack what that could mean. Like say someone is experiencing the irregular periods and maybe some moodiness and some sleep issues. Like what do you invite your patients to do in their lives to potentially mitigate these symptoms or potentially be able to recreate that homeostatic balance that we strive for?
Well, one of the first things I always talk to people about is, and I find this is one of the hardest and most ongoing conversations to have with patients, is where are opportunities for you to slow down a little bit?
Why is slowing down so important? This cannot be like stated too
I
loudly.
I know. I know, and I know this from my own experience. And
Mine
I
too.
know that you do too, right? It is the
Yeah.
hardest thing because I think that, culturally and uh, we are encouraged to just be busy and be doing and be going and be
Of
um,
service.
of service and making sure that everyone else is taken care of all the time and and if we think about or talk about, okay, but I have to go back and replenish my own well before I let more energy go out, then somehow that gets perceived as selfish or self-centered or and I think that a lot of times that comes from the outside environment, but I think that that's also an internal narrative that we carry. Like, if I take the time to spend an hour taking a bath and doing some meditation and just allowing my nervous system to settle down so that maybe I can go to sleep, then that's an hour that I didn't spend prepping for tomorrow's meeting or looking at my patient charts for tomorrow or making my kids lunches or any number of other things that could take the place of that ritual that could allow for, oh, then maybe I could be in bed by 10 o'clock and actually fall asleep.
Yeah, everything you just said is so embedded in the culture of what it is to be a good woman, right? Or
Mhm.
that
Yeah,
there's so much cultural reward to overriding what we know that we need to do for ourselves. But it also could be that we don't necessarily know that we need to do it for ourselves because we've gotten away with it for so long, right? That
exactly.
precisely what you were saying about like when we're in
Mhm.
our 20s, it's like you can stay up till 3 in the morning, you can do all these things and like be relatively unfazed because we have this reservoir of reserve energy to draw
Mhm.
upon that just
Yes.
isn't there as we get older. And so like there's the cultural pressure, there's the fact that there's no historical precedent for this,
Mhm.
but and there's also, I think, just the fact that I just to again like really contextualize it, that we live in a society that that makes it very difficult to do these things, that like we are set up in late capitalism for essentially like it, I don't know how people do it, right? Like there is such a tremendous pressure, and now with COVID, it's like so much extra responsibility falling to women, and it is there are so many structural challenges where it's not like we have childcare paid for, and it's not like we have healthcare as a universal human right, and it's not
Mhm.
like we have jobs that pay a living wage. And so there are a lot of people who are being kind of forced into this position of burning the candle at both ends and simply not having enough left over, because the body's always going to prioritize survival over reproductive
Right.
hormone health, to make these transitions smooth ones. And so it just, I think, recognizing, like, one of the things that I like to tell my patients is is recognizing that our adrenals and our estrogen and progesterone come out of the same bucket, and so
Mhm.
living your life as an emergency or constantly kind of being in a low grade state of sympathetic fight or flight, freeze, fawn,
Mhm.
is going to lead to the exacerbation of all of the menopausal symptoms.
Right. And I think it is so easy to slip into the trap of thinking, well, then that means that I have to take 2 hours out of my day every day to do all these complicated things to, you know, survive this transition. And if I can't do that, then why even bother? It's, not even worth it. And I feel like reminding people and just, I guess, bringing awareness to the fact that it doesn't take, because you're right, we are being forced into this sort of, especially as women, this kind of being in survival mode and trying to juggle all these things, especially with the pandemic and the, kids on doing online school. And but I think it's important to bring awareness to the fact that you can do like 60 seconds of lower belly breathing, breath work, connection with your body. And that is enough to begin to downregulate your nervous system out of that kind of fight or flight place.
I'm so happy that you just brought up the 60-second breathing break, because it's one of my literally my first assignments to almost everyone is
Yeah.
just like we eat 3 times a day. It's time to start breathing and regulating the nervous system intentionally for a minute to 1 to 5, a
Yeah.
couple times a day. So because that actually can remind the body, here's our home base is relaxation.
Right. Right.
What other practices do you feel like are really like short but doable game changers for people?
Well, I feel like the breathwork, I am like you, the breathwork practice is one of my first assignments. And I think another thing is bringing some intentionality around meals and eating. Like taking, not everybody has an hour for lunch, but I bet you have 15 or 20 minutes. And so taking your midday meal, and I think the midday meal is especially important because that's the one that we tend to eat, at our desk in the car while we're answering email or doing 50 other things. But to take that 15 minutes and just sit and be with your food, maybe do a breathing practice before you start eating, and then just take that time to focus on the one thing that you're doing right now, which is taking in nourishment for yourself.
As a podcaster, I work hard to bring you fresh strategies to support your health, happiness, and personal evolution every week. If you appreciate this show, I would so appreciate you sharing it with a friend who you think could benefit, like I'm about to do here. Could you use some frivolous entertainment designed to make you feel good? Heaving Bosoms is a romance readers podcast in which two best friends, Erin in Alaska and Melody in New Jersey, gush, giggle, snark, and snort their way through different romance novels each week. If you love fangirling about your latest reads with your best friends, you'll love listening to Erin and Melody do a deep breakdown of every romance trope and subgenre they can. Ballrooms, billionaires, aliens, Bigfoots, and more. Who had any idea there were this many genres of romance novels? I, for one, did not. The best part is you don't actually have to be a romance reader yourself or read the books that they recap, because they tell you the story scene by scene while adding their own comedic flair. The recaps come with a heaping dose of unconditional friendship, open-hearted feminism, and hilarious tangents. From Tessa Dare to Alyssa Cole to Sarah J. Maas, Erin and Mel are tackling every kind of smooching book they can find, and they're always taking suggestions. They recommend starting with episode 30, The Hating Game by Sally Thorne, or episode 38, Mastered by Her Mates by Grace Goodwin. Just don't listen around the kids because, like your favorite books, these two can get a little explicit. You can find Heaving Bosoms on Apple Podcasts or your podcatcher of choice. Because pleasure, play, and doing something that's enjoyable just for its own sake is part of what being a self-authoring human being is all about. Why is that so important that we not be multitasking, taking in other pieces of information, or literally moving while we're eating lunch?
Well, from a Chinese medicine
Yeah,
point of view, as we take in our food, it is the job of the spleen and the stomach to take those nutrients that we bring in. The spleen or the stomach breaks them down with the digestive fire and then sends them to the spleen. And then the spleen does the job of transforming those nutrients into energy and then transporting them throughout the body to to everything, to just take our energy where it needs to be. But when we're moving and thinking, that is a function of wood, of the element of wood and the liver. And if we've got our liver energy really engaged while we're trying to do this sort of earthy grounding practice of taking in nourishment and moving it throughout our body, the liver is, so its job is just to do and to move and to go, 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 go. And it is very easy for the liver to do what we call in Chinese medicine overact on the spleen and the stomach, and get in there and sort of disrupt that flow of energy because, well, we need to be thinking and we need to be typing and we need to be responding and we need to be doing this, instead of giving the spleen and the stomach that space and energy to transform and transport our nourishment.
absolutely. Yeah, really well explained, I think. And just to fill that out for people, that liver overacting on the spleen and stomach can look like indigestion or irritable bowel syndrome, or really just things not sitting well, or really any sort of like nervous system, like if you're doing something and you're not quite relaxed, like if you haven't disengaged from work and you are trying to consume your food, you're very likely you're not fully in that rest and digest, rest and repair mode. So things aren't going to go very well there. And that is going to impact our ability to feel clear headed and our ability to feel energized and focused and all the things.
Yes. And that just brings up another thing that I think about with this perimenopausal transition is the way that as your hormones are shifting and your balance of yin and yang is changing, the direction that your energy moves as your menstrual cycle changes begins to shift as well. And in order for that shift in direction to happen smoothly, it's really important that the chi is flowing well, that the liver is unimpeded and doing what it needs to do. And if one of the first things that happens as we get overwhelmed and stressed and busy is that the liver chi begins to get a little stuck and constrained, and
And some signs of that
would include headaches, irritability, digestive concerns, as you just mentioned, like irritable bowels or bloating or diarrhea or constipation, anxiety, feeling you have something stuck in your throat, increasing menstrual cramps, or worsening PMS symptoms like breast tenderness, bloating, painful periods, which often happens during perimenopause.
Yeah, all of that. All of that. I would add to that difficulty falling asleep or waking
Ah,
up at 2
yes.
a.m. Yeah,
Mhm.
like all of those things are signs of what we would call liver qi stagnation. And the good news is that Chinese herbal medicine and acupuncture are beautiful and elegant solutions
Mhm.
for liver qi stagnation. Of course, like
Yes.
the thing is, like if we think about like the liver's job is to keep everything on an even keel, like everything happening according to its right timing, and that just like right now you can't see what I'm doing, but I'm moving my fingers and my hands in a circle, basically like just this free and easy circular flow of qi throughout the body. And so it's the kind of thing where like in order for that to happen, there needs to be movement in your life. Like it, so in
Mhm.
other words, like I think
Yes.
that one of the things that so like yes, someone can come in and get acupuncture and that can downshift them into parasympathetic. We can give them herbs that help keep that liver chi moving for them and do whatever other imbalances that need to be corrected. But movement in general can be one of the best ways for people to be able to self-regulate and, like, first of all, discharge the stress chemistry that we're in all the time. It's like, it's
Mhm.
not necessarily about, like, yes, it's great to like address the structural, what is making you stressed, and see if you can change those circumstances so that they don't keep putting you in that same stressed position all the time. But
Right.
you also still have to deal with literally the stuck energy in your body, which can be emotional in nature, like literally any unprocessed emotion, whether it's grief or sadness or anger or fear or whatever. Not taking the time to allow emotions to be felt so that they move through us is a major cause of liver qi stagnation. So giving ourselves time and space to feel what there is to feel is super critical. And so is moving our bodies, because that literally
Yes.
helps to discharge the stress chemistry, as though, we were wild animals shaking after an encounter with a predator.
Mhm. Yes, definitely. And I think it's important also to recognize, and this is where a Chinese medicine practitioner can be helpful in conversation, to understand the kinds of movement that our bodies are going to respond to best. Like if you're a more earthy kind of person, then something like really slow restorative yoga, walking, being out in nature is going to be wonderful. But if you're a really woody person, doing exclusively if you're a really woody person, those slow moving activities are going to be really good for you as well. I'm really woody, so I'm laughing at myself. um,
Right there with you. Yeah, but it's also like, we're not going to crave that. We're going to crave
yeah,
intensity. And
right. But finding that right balance of intensity to help process that energy, I feel like is important, like sort of allowing yourself those more intensive bouts of exercise to be balanced with the slower things. And as an earth person, you may be drawn more to those slower things, but what ways can you find to maybe up the intensity a little bit in a way that's nourishing for you and not depleting?
for those who are kind of like trying to make sense of this at home, I can think about clients that I've had, like, where they can only relax after they've gone for a run or had a really intense workout. They literally don't know how
Uh-huh.
to do it. So I'll just build in both. Like, okay, do that. Do do the thing
Yeah,
that you need to do in order to feel like that, in order to feel like, okay, now you can relax, and then move into, add that 15-minute shavasana, or
right.
that breathing practice, or that slow qigong, or that, whatever it is, that so
Hmm.
that you're at least getting some yin and some yang. And a lot of times what I hear back from people is that when they start with the both, and like, I can do my intensity and my more gentle yin practice, is that they find that they actually grow to like the yin practice more, but they haven't necessarily given themselves permission to be slower and more gentle and more, but it's, and
Right.
I still find this, if I have like an extra half hour in my day, my inclination and my habits, right? This idea, this who I think I need to be in the world, or how I'm used to operating, tends to be pretty fast. And the days that I'm like, oh, I could get out my foam roller and my yoga,
Yeah.
balls, and I could give myself like some awesome abhyanga warm oil massage, and I could take a bath, and like all these things. It's I love it. My body loves it. But it's the kind of thing that, like, my mind hasn't necessarily made the leap that actually giving myself permission to be gentle and soft is okay.
Hmm. Yes, exactly. And as we're talking about just supporting the adrenal system, and down regulating some of those stress hormones, those that more gentle activity is really important for that. But I think you're so right. I mean, I do the same. I'm sort of in that same mindset that you're talking about, that it's really hard for me to just give myself permission to go right to that restorative practice. Some days I feel like I have to do the more intense thing first, and then that gives me access and sort of permission to settle down and be in that more gentle moving place.
I'd love to know if there are other key practices for you personally.
You know, uh, yes, yoga is really like I said, I'm very woody. So yoga is really good for me because of the movement and the way that I feel like it brings my awareness into my body in a way that not much else does. I learned yoga from an Iyengar trained teacher originally. So there was a lot of focus on sort of precision and alignment. And I've expanded beyond that quite a bit in my practice, but that foundation of just connecting internally with this part is doing that and that part is doing this, and building in the breath for me is really probably one of the most fundamentally restoring things there is. And I feel like, some people don't want to, yoga doesn't feel accessible to them. I have a lot of thoughts about that, but we don't have enough time to
Yes.
talk about we don't have enough time to talk about that. But I feel like any sort of movement practice, whether it's qigong or tai chi or Feldenkrais practices, that allows you to connect awareness with movement and breath is really nourishing
Right.
and helpful.
I couldn't agree more. It's yeah, so helpful and so brings us into our bodies, right? It helps us when you literally uniting the body and mind
Hmm.
helps us pay attention in a more respectful way.
Yes. Yeah, and I really found that kind of mindful movement and connection with the body is what opened the gateway to meditation for me. So meditation is a big part, a big practice for me as well. And I learned a very somatic style of meditation, which is very grounded in the body. And so there are meditation practices out there that are a little more about working specifically with the mind or even trying to transcend the body. And those practices never really connected for me, but grounding myself in the body on the cushion with the breath, and that grew for me out of my yoga practice.
Awesome. Yeah, and really I think that's another really I would say a much more like embodied meditation I think is inherently well, it's more of the yin. It's more of,
Hmm.
being in our bodies and of our bodies and recognizing our bodies as connection to our consciousness and not something that we need to transcend and get over or, like that
Right.
is I think just a really empowering framing for
Hmm.
for a lot of women. And incidentally, when I'm talking about women, I'm talking about really anyone in a female body who's experiencing
Yes.
these changes, like whether or not no matter how someone identifies as far as gender goes. I'm curious, like just with what we know from our unique perspective as Chinese medicine practitioners, just why not just beat these symptoms into submission with bioidentical hormones, for example. And by the way, I should say that I'm a huge fan of bioidentical hormones for a lot,
Yes.
for a lot of people
Right.
for a lot of reasons.
Mhm.
But I think that there's an opportunity in looking through the lens of Chinese medicine and looking at pattern differentiation, whether because a lot of times people are on bioidentical hormones, but they're still experiencing stuff that they don't want to be experiencing. And so the
Exactly.
two can really work together. So I'd love for you to just speak to like what benefit is it for someone to be looking at perimenopause or menopause, to be perhaps working with a Chinese medicine practitioner or looking through this lens at themselves?
Well, I think one of the beautiful things about Chinese medicine is that, we're always looking for balance. We're always looking to balance the organism, to bring things back to homeostasis, to look at, you know, you can think about 1,000, 3,000, 5,000 years of like theory development and all of these things, but it always comes down to the most simple balance of yin and yang within the body. There's a natural progression and transition of the balance of yin and yang in the body as we age. And it's beautiful. And it's not all about, oh, as you age, everything gets depleted. So you have to just, muddle through with these depleted resources of qi and blood and jing. There's a difference in the energetic balance of, as I was saying earlier, periods of life where we're more outward and more yang and putting things out into the world. And then there's that return of the yang to the body, which becomes more yin. Um, and what unfortunately happens in allopathic medicine, and I feel like even in some alternative Western approaches, is that this whole idea of perimenopause and the menopausal transition gets medicalized, like it's something that needs to be treated, and that these symptoms are a sign of disease. And that's not, to me, that's false. And so taking the steps from a Chinese medicine point of view to make sure that the liver is smoothed out and happy and the energy's flowing as it can, so this natural rebalancing of yin and yang can happen, and making sure that our digestion is optimized so that our spleen and stomach can take in nourishment and nutrients and support all the systems of our body as this transition happens is great. And making sure that we're moving and we're breathing so that our lungs are functioning optimally and we're bringing in fresh air to be, which is part of that whole creation of chi and energy that happens with the spleen, and also is really important for the health of our immune system. And we're doing everything we can to nourish and support our body as it naturally makes this shift, so that we're not depleting everything that comes from the kidneys and all of our essence or our jing, or that fundamental foundational energy that carries us through to the end of our life. I don't know if I answered your question or not.
Yeah, no, I think it's a beautiful answer. And to bring it back to the cycles of seven, right? And these
Mhm,
phases of life that we talk about, that as we move from kind of the mother stage to the crone stage metaphorically, right? That
mhm.
there's also kind of like a stop giving a shit that can happen, right? Like
Right.
where estrogen makes us be really attuned to other people's emotions and things like that. And
Uh-huh.
as that stops being the major player, in the physiological picture, that actually it takes a back seat. And I think that
Yes.
some of what that allows us access to, in a sense, a more, well, it can change our orientation towards what's important to us. And if there is something kind of like for ourselves or of our own soul that wants to be expressed, whether it's, through activism or art or spirituality or,
Right.
taking on a new role in life, that there really is there's something that is perhaps as part of our curriculum that we haven't yet gotten around to addressing, that becomes
Mhm.
more urgent, and that we
Yeah.
kind of get the sense that there isn't, that it becomes more important, it becomes more difficult to stay in relationships and jobs and circumstances that feel like drains on that, or inhibiting something that on a deep soul level is wanting to happen.
Exactly. And it's interesting. We talked about this just before we started recording, but I'm taking a class right now with a woman named Lillian Bridges, who teaches this particular tradition of Chinese space reading. And she talks, and I won't go into that because it's really complicated,
Oh, she's
but
so cool though. I've taken a
she's
class with her, and
amazing.
yeah, she's a phenomenal
Just
person to study.
brilliant. Yeah, but she talks a lot about Jing, and how Jing holds like our ancestral talents and abilities, like the things that have come down through generations and likely from people that we don't even know about. But these talents and abilities that come with us into this life, and they are things that we are good at, or that we love, or that we're drawn to, that may or may not be our profession. In fact, quite often are not profession and how important it is to, especially as we move through our 40s and into our 50s and 60s, to do these things, to engage in these activities, and that actually activates and brings forward our jing and sustains us and is part of that whole yang shen tradition of nourishing longevity. So, whether it's like cooking or music, playing an instrument, or art, even if you're not very good at it, if you enjoy it or you're drawn to it, engaging in these activities is really an important part of moving into this next stage of life. Like you
Yeah, it's
said,
like it's time to do your
yeah,
purpose. It's time to do your
yep,
joy. And it doesn't have to be purpose with like a capital P as like it's one thing. And people like can, wring their hands about like, well, I don't know what it is. It's like, well,
yeah,
like you do actually. It's that
yeah,
there's and like, and if you really feel out of touch, that giving yourself permission to just consider like what actually would make you fulfilled in this life, what would actually
yeah.
make you feel like this was a life worth living. That which I think is a question that is answered differently at different phases in life.
Yes, definitely. And one of the things Lillian says when you're looking for these things is to is to go back and reflect on or ask somebody what were you doing when you were 3 or 4 or 5 years old? What were the things that you were sort of drawn to, that you were maybe mischievous or bad about, or those things that we in childhood love, being building with blocks, or running around outside picking flowers, or I don't know, telling stories, singing songs, dancing, all these things.
It's a great place to look for clues, I think.
Yes.
I like to have people keep an enlivenment journal, like just not an actual journal, but just like something where they can jot down, where did I come alive today? Like what was I drawn to? What what
Mm,
what really kindled
yes.
my heart? Because that can be something that is a clue towards like, yeah, do more of that, get more of that in my
Yes.
life. So
I love that.
thanks. So we've gone kind of like deeply into this like soulful mind body spirit connected end of the conversation to bring it back to really concrete ways that Chinese medicine can help people experiencing menopausal symptom transitions. Like just I think it's really important just to underscore that we actually can help your insomnia. We actually can help your
Yes.
mood swings. We actually
Mhm.
can normalize the periods. Yeah, I'd love for you to talk us through, like, do you have maybe a case study of someone that you've worked with who really got incredible results through working with you on some of these issues?
Actually, I do. And her results were so good that I was honestly a little bit surprised. But I had a woman come to me, it's been a couple of years ago, and she was in her early 50s and had just gone through, she'd had a hysterectomy and had one ovary removed. She still had one of her ovaries, questionable how functional it was. So she was sort of in life, natural menopause, but also maybe partially medically induced menopause, which can be a lot more dramatic and uncomfortable. She also had her son had just graduated and gone to college, and her daughter was a junior in high school and, very active and busy. And she and her husband run a small business that involves a lot of marketing and a lot of travel. And they were sort of building product lines. And she was really busy and really stressed and having severe hot flashes several times a day and also at night. And they were waking her up at night, lots of sweating, having some anxiety, some irritability. Was experiencing what we call brain fog, that just struggling to think as clearly as she would like, and also some short-term memory issues. And a little bit of, with the hot flashes, she was having anxiety, of course, partially related to the hot flashes, but also just from the social stigma of like being out in public and having her face get red and get sweaty and feel uncomfortable and feeling like, oh my gosh, everyone can notice what's going on. So we set up, and she came for acupuncture once a week for, gosh, I want to say 12 weeks or so, which is great. People can do that. That regular treatment is really helpful. And we focused on, she had some signs that maybe her kidneys were a little deficient, but her kidney pulses were pretty strong. It seemed more to me, especially based on all the sweating, that she was a little more blood deficient than yin deficient, and definitely stagnant liver cheese. Such stagnant pulses. Her pulses were so wiry in the middle positions, and she was having some of the accompanying digestive stuff. So we talked about making some changes to her diet that would support better digestion and sort of making her spleen a little happier, fewer cold vegetables and salads, more steamed vegetables, some rice, and then taking time to slow down, like I talked about earlier, and enjoy that afternoon meal. We talked about doing the breathing breaks. And then I also put her on a formula she couldn't really, granules were going to be hard for her just because of all the things she had going on in her life. So I put her on a tableted formula designed to move the liver, support the spleen energy, and also clear some excess heat. And within that also build the blood a little bit.
Is that a
And
Dutch or Xiaoyao kind of situation?
it's a formula from the Institute of Traditional Medicine in Portland called Nufar 14, which
Oh
is
yeah, I love that one.
variation.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
variation of Jiawei Xiaoyan. And she just did great. Within a month, she was sleeping better and having less hot flashes. Her anxiety was pretty much gone, and her digestion was not great, but improving. And by the time we got to the end of the series of treatments, she was doing great, sleeping well. I think she did the herbs for another month or two at the end of that 12 weeks, but she's just been back periodically for a tune-up here and there, and it was really really great to see her.
Well, that kind of story is life changing.
Yeah,
It's awesome. It's awesome.
yeah,
So thanks for sharing that. I think it really helps for people to be able to see themselves in someone else's experience and just know
yeah,
that there is yeah, the way that obviously we look at different diagnoses, different ways that different sets of symptoms that people present with will get a different Chinese medicine diagnosis and thus a different treatment plan. But
right.
what they would all maybe have in common is some lifestyle and diet stuff, some breathing meditation stuff,
Mhm.
some herbs, some acupuncture, and between all of those things, we can steer someone back in the direction of the body knowing what to do and being able to show up more comfortably and more confidently in our skins.
Exactly. And I feel like another really big piece of that whole story and many of these, the successful patient stories is just making the commitment to take that 1 hour every week for herself, to come in for treatment, to talk with me, to lay on the table with the needles in, to have that downtime was huge for her to
And
make that
and
commitment for
also
herself.
yes to taking time for herself. And also there's a therapeutic aspect of being seen and heard and understood, which you clearly give her
Yes.
when you are able to see her so clearly that you can lead her down a path to being her own healer.
Right. And I think there's a tendency when we have these crazy symptoms like the weird sweating and the hot flashes and the, feeling anxious for maybe no particular reason or not sleeping well, to feel like we're a little bit of a like, I'm crazy. What's going on? This is not normal. And
Right.
to sit and have a conversation with someone who says, oh no, this is not this is not unusual. It's fine. There's a forward through this, and it's not in your head. It's not in your imagination. It's real, but it's also not insurmountable.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think that is just letting people know that we have a framework for thinking about these things and that there is help available is, I think, partly why I wanted to do this show. So thanks for giving people out there hope that things can in fact be different and that it can be just relatively short amount of time, a few months, and making like a game-changing difference in how we end up feeling. Amy, I know that we are short on time here, and I want to make sure that people know how to reach out to you. That we will definitely put a link to your future website in the show notes of
Yes, thanks.
groundandskyhealth.com. Is there anything else that you'd like to invite people to do, either to stay connected to you or to do for themselves?
Well, I have my email address that will be associated with my new website that we'll be launching soon is groundandskyhealth@gmail.com. And I don't have Facebook or Instagram up for that business yet, but I do have them up personally. So feel free to connect with me there. On Instagram, it is Amy Z Acupuncture. And on Facebook, it is just Amy Zahm.
Great. Thank you so much for having this conversation. And I just love how you have gone on to deepen your knowledge of this stuff in such a beautiful way, and that you are broadening your platform to serve people not just your local area, but from all over. So that's just phenomenal. And I'm so excited to get to talk to you again.
Yes, Bertie, thanks so much for having me on. It's great to talk with you. I love talking about Chinese medicine. So
Me too. Isn't it great that we get to do this and it gets to
it
help people?
is.
It's so fun.
It is
Yeah.
so fun. It's wonderful.
Thanks for listening today. To check out the show notes, get on my email list, or drop me a line, head to brodywelch.com. That's Brody with an IE and Welch with a CH. I'd love to hear from you. If you learned something new or feel inspired to try something different in your life, I'd love for you to pay it forward by sharing this episode with a friend who you think could also benefit, and give them a reason to listen. You'll be helping to create a world where we encourage each other to embody self-respect. Till next time, be good to yourself.